A note before we begin. This is the final episode of Season 5 of Crimes of the Centuries. It's strange to think back on how it all began in a closet during a pandemic. I want to thank you all for your continued support and remind you that you can be even more supportive over at grabbagcollab.com. We're barreling right into Season 6 next week. I have more than 205 topics on my still-to-tackle list of episode ideas, so if you all keep listening, we've got a long way to go yet. Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking that they change laws, change society, or even earn the label Crime of the Century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. Three men were traveling to a political rally to be held in Hamburg, Germany. They had spent the night in a Nuremberg hotel and had already checked out and left when the manager of the hotel got an urgent phone call from Munich. It was Saturday, September 19th, 1931. The three men in the car were the up-and-coming politician Adolf Hitler, a man who had only recently left prison to found his own party, Heinrich Hoffmann, his friend and personal photographer, and driver Julius Schreck, leader of Hitler's protection squad. The story goes that Hitler had told Hoffmann the day before, just as they were leaving his apartment in Munich for the campaign swing, that he had a bad feeling about the day. Hoffmann had reassured him that all was well. Hitler had seemed distracted, reluctant to leave, but there were speeches to give, crowds to work, power to consolidate. While driving north to the campaign rally, Hitler looked in the rearview mirror and saw a car racing toward them. It was a taxi, and inside was someone from the hotel, gesturing for them to stop. When they did, the messenger told Hitler he was urgently requested to call Braunhaus, the National Socialist German Workers' Party headquarters. The car turned back and found a phone booth. Hitler's adjutant, Rudolf Hess, answered. It was about 11:45 a.m. "Hess," Hitler is said to have screamed. "Answer me, yes or no, is she alive or dead? Hess? Hess?" There was no response. Maybe the phone went dead. Or maybe Hess didn't have the courage to tell Hitler and simply hung up. Hitler, now frantic, told his companions, "Something has happened to Geli. I must see Geli alive again." He then told Schreck to floor it back to Munich. In the town of Ebenhausen, they were stopped and ticketed for speeding. They were back in Munich by 2:45. Angela Geli Raubal was indeed dead. The 23-year-old had been found that morning by staff, lying on the floor of her bedroom in a pool of blood. It looked as if she had died by suicide in her bedroom in the spacious apartment she shared with Hitler. A Walther 635 had done the job. It was beside her when she was found, or near her, depending on which account you believe. The gun belonged to Hitler. The house staff said the door to her room had been locked from the inside. No one had heard a shot. By the time they found her, rigor mortis had already set in. It was a public relations mess for a politician on the cusp of grasping power. The timing was catastrophic. But for Hitler on a personal level, it was something more. This was the only woman, apart from his mother, that historians would ever concede he had loved. That woman was now dead, apparently by her own hand while living in his house, which was full of those he employed. She had been dead for hours before she was found. How did this happen? What had she done? Did it even make sense? And did the history of the world tilt irrevocably toward darkness in that moment? A darkness she might have prevented? Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Home Chef. You know what I've decided I'm done with?
Let me guess. Staring into the fridge like it's going to magically assemble dinner for you?
Exactly. After a long day, I don't want to strategize. I want dinner to just exist. That's why we've been leaning on Home Chef again.
It really does take the pressure off. The meals show up fresh, pre-portioned, and the recipes are actually easy to follow.
And they taste good, which feels like it should be obvious, but it's not always the case.
And people really love it. Home Chef is rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease.
That tracks. Whether we're doing a 30-minute meal, an oven-ready tray, or something from the family menu, it feels doable, even on busy nights.
And I like that it's not one size fits all. There are over 30 meal options each week, so you can pick what actually fits your tastes. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off and free shipping for your first box plus free dessert for life. Go to homechef.com/COTC.
That's homechef.com/COTC for 50% off your first box and free dessert for life.
Homechef.com/COTC. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
Of all the things we know about Adolf Hitler, the story of how and why 23-year-old Geli Raubal, his lover and his niece, met her end seems to have been dwarfed by the man's much more significant crimes against humanity. Maybe it shouldn't be, because, as you'll see, it informs all that followed. Geli, given name Angela, was the daughter of Hitler's older half-sister, also named Angela. She had come to live with a man she called Uncle Alf when she was 19 and had just graduated from high school. Uncle Alf had been first enchanted by her when she was just 13, but he didn't get the chance to see her all that much. He and his sister weren't especially close, plus he was too busy career building and serving time for his part in the beer hall putsch to spend time in Austria with his kin. He had not kept up with his family, having left them when he was 16 to wander around Vienna as a bohemian in search of himself. He slept on floors and in hostels for years, trying to eke out an artist's life. He had already failed to get into its famous art school. He must have imagined that was better and easier than what was at home in his hometown of Linz. When he was a small child, his father Alois had regularly beaten him, once so badly that his mother, Clara, feared he was dead. Now about that family name. Alois Hitler was himself the illegitimate son of a housemaid named Maria Schicklgruber. In 1876, before Adolf was born, Alois changed his surname from Schicklgruber to Hitler. Side note, that means had Alois not made that change, the world would have been shouting, Heil Schicklgruber. Or maybe it wouldn't have been. Alois died in 1903 when Adolf was 13. When Hitler's mother died 4 years later in 1907, Adolf was 18. He felt abandoned and alone. He sent no money home to take care of his younger sister, Paula, who had been taken in by kind relatives after their mother's death. He likely lived off another aunt's savings, which he somehow convinced her to give him. In February 1914, while living in Munich, he was conscripted for service in the Austro-Hungarian army, but was found unfit for medical reasons and too weak to bear arms. A few months later, when the First World War broke out, he petitioned the King of Bavaria for permission to serve as a foreign national. The 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment apparently had no qualms about his health. He served that regiment as a dispatch runner. It's believed he never engaged in combat and thus never killed anyone in that conflict. Now back to Angela and the family structure. Angela, Hitler's half-sister and Geli's mother, had been the product of their father's second marriage to Franziska Matzelsberger. When Alois was widowed a second time, his housekeeper and second cousin Clara was already pregnant with his child. By the by, Alois and Clara had needed and got papal dispensation to marry because the church was none too keen on the cousin marrying business by then. When Alois died, Angela quickly got out of the house and married Leo Raubal. Now Clara doted on Adolf. The first 3 children she had given birth to had died only months after being born. She gave Adolf a sister, Paula, 7 years later in 1896. Flash forward to 1927. Hitler was 38, a lone wolf of sorts, recently released from prison and starting to gain a following. He invited his widowed half-sister Angela to bring her 2 girls, Geli, now 19, and 17-year-old Elfriede, to Obersalzberg to move into his Spartan little flat located in the German Alpine village close to the Austrian border. This wasn't a kind-hearted move. Angela was not treated as a guest or a family member, but rather as a housekeeper and cook who waited on him restaurant-style, drew his bath, washed his linen, fetched his slippers, and stayed out of his way. But with young Geli in his home now, he grew even more enchanted. He was not a man who had much romantic experience at this point, despite his age. His friends later could barely recall any significant interaction with women, as he did not think their opinions were worth much and believed that women were for childbearing and chores. A serious, dour man who was now dead set on wresting control of Germany and restoring it to its prior post-war glory, Hitler had been working endlessly to build his party base, plot strategy, and oversee violent street brawls aimed at weakening communist opposition. He had no time for idle chatter or frivolous entertainment. Until Geli. With her beguiling wholesomeness, she somehow managed to get Uncle Alf to take her to the movies and to the opera. He carried her bags when he took her shopping. Together, they laughed at what Walt Disney was doing with Steamboat Willie. They went on picnics. He frequently played the piano while she sang, something she was very good at. Here's writer and researcher Tony Wilkins from War of the Worlds.
He told his chief economic advisor, Otto Wagner, quote, "I can sit next to young women who leave me completely cold. I feel nothing, or they actually irritate me. But a girl like Geli, with her, I become cheerful and bright. And if I have listened for an hour to her perhaps silly chatter, I am free of all weariness and listlessness." End quote.
Everyone, all his minions and Geli's mother, saw it. Specifically, they saw a young and uninhibited woman who some considered beautiful, and others saw as plump, fresh-faced, and milk-fed. Pictures of her confirm all that. In some, she is almost radiantly and defiantly gorgeous. In others, she looks straight out of The Sound of Music. But this quote, very often repeated in my research, stuck with me as particularly telling.
Frau Braun, a woman who lived in the same apartment building as Geli's family in the 1920s, recalled, quote, "I was walking down the street outside our apartment building, and I heard her singing. I saw her and I stopped dead. She was just so tall and beautiful that I was speechless. And she saw me standing frozen and said, 'Are you frightened of me?' And I said, 'No, I was just admiring you.' She was just so tall and beautiful. I'd never seen anyone like that." End quote.
Geli was reportedly 5'7". She was variously described, I wrote all these down while reading about her, as warm, gentle, affectionate, straightforward, tactile, unpretentious, lively, playful, and provocative with the ability to combine girlishness with womanliness. She was also described as blonde, brunette, or black-haired. I can't explain the discrepancy. She was said to have blue eyes. Here's Nigel Jones, a British author who has written 4 books on Hitler, speaking to the documentary folks at Banijay History.
Geli was a thoroughly normal young woman. She was cheerful, she was bubbly, not hugely intelligent, I would say, but certainly life-affirming and fun.
That's seconded by Roger Morehouse, author of 5 books on Hitler.
One of Hitler's confidants, his photographer Heinrich Hoffmann, said that Geli could light up a room. She could change the mood in a room. So she was certainly someone who was a very lively individual, who was very popular. So very different, really, from the person we imagine Hitler to be.
For most historians, it's clear that Geli relished the attention she was getting from Hitler. And he liked to show her off at party functions, as he often said that most of his officers' wives looked like washerwomen. It's unclear when Hitler and Geli began a sexual relationship, nor is it clear what that looked like. Just know that in 1929, after 2 years of living in a house with both Geli and her mother, Hitler sent his half-sister away to work at Berchtesgaden, his alpine retreat, and he moved Geli into his 9-room apartment on the Prinz-Regentenplatz in Munich. They had separate bedrooms there, but they were next to one another on the same floor. She enrolled at Ludwig Maximilian University to ostensibly study medicine, but she grew tired of that pretty quickly. She was now 21 and wanting to spread her wings. Hitler, for his part, was putting his prison manifesto, Mein Kampf, into action, shifting his strategy from overthrowing the government outright to acquiring power by legal elections. He was away a lot of the time perfecting his podium-pounding speeches and anti-Semitic rhetoric. As the German economy refused to improve under the current regime, he seemed like a promising option to some to change the very fabric of German society. That time away gave Geli time to see other men behind his back. When home, he became progressively more controlling of Geli. This is Hitler biographer Joachim Fest writing about the power struggle between them. Quote, "The affection Hitler felt for this pretty, superficial niece soon developed into a passionate relationship hopelessly burdened by his intolerance, his romantic ideals of womanhood, and avuncular scruples." End quote. At times, it seemed, Hitler would give her permission to see other men. Still, behind his back, she began a relationship with Hitler's sometime chauffeur, Emil Maurice, a man who had been at Hitler's side from his days in prison. Their relationship became intimate, and he asked her to marry him. Hitler was bound to find out. Here's Nigel Jones again.
He particularly got enraged at the idea that she was having an erotic sexual relationship with one of his close aides. He actually found them together in a compromising situation and had a riding whip in his hand, which he habitually carried at that time, and threatened to horsewhip, literally, Maurice, and Maurice had to jump out of the window to escape. And in fact, from that time on, he lost his position at Hitler's side and lost his leading position in Hitler's circle.
A small aside, Maurice would be invited back into the fold in 1933 after Geli's death. Now, Geli was furious with her cousin for interfering in her relationship with Maurice. It's anybody's guess what Geli was thinking. It seemed she loved her uncle, but was it romance as she understood it? Was she really smitten with Maurice, or had she been just trying to make Hitler jealous enough to ask her to marry him? Hitler, for his part, gave no indication that he wanted to be married. He knew that being single made him a more appealing candidate to women, and he did not want the distraction. But the distraction was already living in the room next door. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Ollie. It's officially the month of love.
And we all know who your true Valentine is.
Allison Ripley, obviously. No one looks at me the way they do when I open the fridge.
That's not love, that's food anticipation.
Same thing, and that's why we've been feeding them Ollie. If I'm going to celebrate my #1 Valentine's, I'm doing it with real, fresh food they actually get excited about.
Ollie uses human-grade recipes backed by vet nutritionists and crafted with culinary experts. It's real ingredients, slow-cooked, and it looks like actual food.
And they devour it. They're so enthusiastic at mealtime.
I like that the meal plans are tailored to each dog. Perfect portions, mess-free packaging, and it comes with a scoop and that little storage puptainer so the fridge doesn't smell like dog food.
They even have an app with on-demand health screenings and real experts if you have questions. It feels thoughtful, not just food, but support. Now celebrate your #1 Valentine, your greatest love, your dog. Head to ollie.com/COTC, tell them all about your dog, and use code COTC to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today.
Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on your first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/COTC and enter code COTC to get 60% off your first box.
Now we're going to take on a topic that has caused much debate in some rather interesting circles, most having to do with the psychopathy and sexual habits of Adolf Hitler. Consider this a content warning. I should tell you that some of what follows is hearsay and conjecture, though much has been derived from what we know definitively about Hitler's anatomy. I wouldn't normally go in this direction, but this story requires it. So apologies if this seems crass. I don't mean it to be. Okay, so I seem to be beating around the bush. Enough. I will dive in, or better yet, let CNN do it. Here's CNN international anchor Max Foster reporting on a new Channel 4 documentary in late 2025.
Blood found on material from a sofa in Hitler's bunker have been DNA tested, and the results suggest he may have had a rare genetic condition. According to a documentary set to air in the UK, Hitler's DNA has a genetic marker associated with Kallmann syndrome, which can delay puberty, lead to low testosterone levels, and a micropenis.
This last bit about the micropenis may account for the stories that he was teased horribly when he had to take communal showers during the First World War. File this under research I did so you don't have to. What qualifies as a micropenis is a penis that is less than 7.5 centimeters in length in adults when stretched in its flaccid state. That's just short of 3 inches. The normal or average penis length is 5.1 to 5.5 inches. You're welcome. Now, we have known since 1968 that Hitler had right-sided cryptorchidism. In other words, the right testicle failed to descend. This was revealed when the Red Army confirmed it had taken possession of the burned bodies of Hitler and Eva Braun on April 30th, 1945. A Red Army pathologist had made a note that he could not locate one testicle. This genital anomaly may also account for Hitler's being unfit to serve when he was first conscripted in 1914. This is in direct opposition to what Theodor Morell, Hitler's private physician, told American interviewers. Morell said that, quote, Hitler's sexual organs showed no signs of abnormality or pathology, and the secondary sexual characteristics were normally developed, end quote. And yet, a Munich urologist repeatedly told investigators that Hitler had consulted him about the undescended testicle even before he became chancellor. The doctor said he informed Hitler that it was too late to fix it. Even before that, prison intake reports from 1923 state that Hitler had no right testicle. Well, turns out maybe world leaders' personal physicians aren't always trustworthy. Now comes Ernst Humstengel, an American-educated German who was very close to Hitler in the early years, who told this story as cited in his 1957 book, Unheard Witness. He wrote that, quote, old army comrades who had seen him in the wash house had noted that his genital organs were almost freakishly underdeveloped. It seemed to me that this must all be part of the underlying complex in his physical relations, which was compensated for by the terrifying urge for domination expressed in the field of politics, end quote. To that point, it was commonly said that Hitler had a tremendous amount of nervous energy, and that his sexual inadequacies, such as they were, may have accounted for that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. But I do find it telling that Dr. Morell, the aforementioned personal physician to Hitler, was, before his primo assignment, a doctor who specialized in venereal disease, which leads us down one more slippery slope. That is, some historians believe Hitler had contracted syphilis while in Vienna and that the sex worker who gave it to him was Jewish, hence his rage aimed at them. Among those who believed this was famous Nazi hunter and Holocaust survivor Simon Wiesenthal, who said he had documents and supporting evidence that proved it, that perhaps Hitler passed the syphilis to Geli, which may explain her suicide. And do you see how circuitous this all becomes? It's hard to disentangle. Now, before I let go of this, one more thing. Some believe the familiar stiff-armed Heil Hitler salute that the Führer so loved was a substitute for an erection. In Pauline Kohler's book, I Was Hitler's Maid, she wrote that Hitler once confided that, quote, I can hold my arm like that for 2 solid hours. I never feel tired when my stormtroopers and soldiers march past me, and I stand at salute. I never move. My arm is like granite, rigid and unbending. But Göring can't stand it. He has to drop his hand after half an hour at that salute. He's flabby, but I am hard. It's an amazing feat. Sometimes I marvel at my own power. End quote. With all that background, we are still at a loss about what exactly happened between Hitler and Geli. What we do know is that Otto Strasser, one of two brothers who had been by Hitler's side early on before they broke with him over policy, told others that he and Geli had gone out somewhere together when she stopped at a bench to sob. She told Otto that Uncle Alf's possessiveness was suffocating her. But there was more. Here's an excerpt from Hitler's strange fascination with his niece, citing Strasser.
Quote, "His jealousy wasn't the worst thing. He demanded things from her that were simply disgusting. She had never dreamed that such things could happen. When I asked her to tell me, she described things I had previously encountered in my reading of Krafft Ebing's Psychopathia Sexualis when I was a student." End quote.
Strasser was referring to Richard von Krafft-Ebing's foundational work on sexual deviations, behaviors he termed aberrant. Specifically, Strasser said Geli revealed that Hitler would lie on the ground and ask her to undress. He wanted her to hover over him so he could inspect her vagina, ostensibly so he could draw his own pornographic sketches later, and that he would then ask her to urinate on him. I promise you, there's a point in sharing all this. Strasser repeated this later when the U.S. Office of Strategic Studies interrogated him in May 1943. Hitler's friend Ernst Hofstengel seemed to confirm this when he told Allied investigators that one day in 1930, he was told of a blackmail attempt against Hitler. Someone had acquired the Geli nudes he had sketched.
These were not generic nudes, they were, according to Schwarz, depraved, intimate sketches of Geli Raubal with every anatomical detail. The implication was staggering.
The extortion had been paid with party funds, and the drawings, per Hitler's orders, had not been destroyed, but kept in a party safe. This is, of course, all hearsay. No verifiable evidence exists. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that not every expert agrees Hitler was as described above. The famed English historian Hugh Trevor Roper, whose reputation you might recall was tarnished by his authentication of the Hitler diaries, see Season 5, Episode 25, claimed all this talk of the Führer's impotency and strange bedroom behavior was total claptrap. Some historians even dismiss the idea that any of his actions toward Geli went beyond the parental. Some other experts, in particular journalist Ron Rosenbaum, believe that the alleged sexual dysfunction is a too convenient way to explain the why of Hitler. Others get more specific in their criticisms, discounting only Strasser's word on what Geli told him, as, by this time, Otto was having serious issues with Hitler over the direction of the Nazi Party and may have thought this story would be a clever way to discredit him. I'm no judge on whom to trust on this bit of information, which likely would have been devastating to Hitler, the candidate, if it was true and if it was known. But I am a woman of this century, and I believe women when they say they've been sexually abused. Renate Müller, a 1920s film actress known for her light comedies, met Hitler in 1932 after Geli's death. She said he was uncomfortable with her, but gifted her more lavishly than he had Geli or his frequent companion, Eva Braun. Miss Müller later confided in film director Adolf Hitler that Hitler's foreplay consisted of telling her about Gestapo torture techniques, and then he would lay on the floor and demand she kick him, whip him, and degrade him verbally while he pleasured himself. When she traveled to London on holiday in 1936, she saw a former lover, who was Jewish, and they reignited their affair. When she returned to Germany, she realized that Hitler had his Gestapo keep tabs on her, and, as a result, Hitler made sure she was not allowed to work again. She died by suicide in October 1937.
More notable still is the fact that the historian Robert Waite, using reports by the OSS, concluded that of the 7 women who were known to have sexual relationships with Hitler, 6 either took their own lives or attempted to do so, including his long-term partner, Eva Braun, who attempted the act in 1932 and again in 1935.
So we circle back to Geli, who wanted to be free of her uncle, but found herself having to ask his permission to even leave the house. She told her friends that her romantic relationship with Emil Maurice, with whom she had quote-unquote normal sexual relations, had opened a new world to her. After that, she had not been discreet about her complaints against her uncle. Geli was, though she may not have realized it, a threat to him. With her knowledge, he could be, at best, embarrassed, at worst, blackmailed, and finished as a force in German politics. Maybe there was a time that Hitler had thought he would make her his bride, but he told Heinrich Hoffmann that was not likely his best course of action. This is from his book, Hitler Was My Best Friend.
He told another confidant, Heinrich Hoffmann, his personal photographer, quote, "You know, Hoffmann, I'm so concerned about Geli's future that I feel I have to watch over her. I love Geli and could marry her. Good, but you know what my viewpoint is. I want to remain single. So I retain the right to exert an influence on her circle of friends until such a time as she finds the right man. What Geli sees as compulsion is simply prudence. I want to stop her from falling into the hands of someone unsuitable."
She would never have the opportunity. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Hims. All right, let's talk about something that's way more common than people want to admit.
Yep, erectile dysfunction. Not exactly dinner conversation, but it should be normal conversation.
Because it's common and treatable.
And what I like about Hims is that it takes the awkwardness out of it. Through Hims, you can access personalized prescription treatment options for ED, if prescribed.
And it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Hims offers access to ED treatment options ranging from personalized products to trusted generics that cost 95% less than brand names, if prescribed. You connect with a licensed provider 100% online on your schedule. It's expert care brought straight to you. Real medical providers, personalized treatments, and a plan built around your goals.
Think of Hims as your digital front door to feeling like yourself again.
To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/COTC. That's hims.com/COTC for your free online visit. hims.com/COTC.
Featured products include compounded drugs, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan. In late 1929, while still living with Geli, Hitler met Eva Braun, a charming shopgirl who he courted with flowers and lunches. He made sure he returned home at night to be with Geli. It was an awkward love triangle. Some historians suggested that Eva was a ploy to make Geli jealous, and that it worked. Others think that Eva was willing to do things Geli had been reluctant to. In any case, by 1931, Hitler had become an extremely jealous man. He refused to let Geli go to Vienna to receive the kind of vocal training she needed to make singing a viable career. He explained this away by saying he feared for her safety as his own popularity was soaring and the opposition was dangerous. To that end, he taught her how to load and clean his personal weapon, the Walther 635. He showed her where he kept it. It's hard to determine how well he succeeded in keeping Geli buttoned up when he was away. Henrietta Hoffmann, the daughter of Heinrich, was a close friend and is the source for a lot of what we know about Geli's feelings. Henrietta, who was known as Henny, said that Christa Schroeder, Hitler's private secretary, found letters from an unnamed man in Geli's room immediately after her death. She was quite specific about what they said, according to Geli biographer Ronald Heyman in his book, Hitler and Geli. The man wrote, quote, "Now your uncle, who knows how much influence he has over your mother, is trying to exploit her weakness with boundless cynicism. Unfortunately, we won't be in a position to fight back against this blackmail until after you're 21. He's putting obstacles in the way of our mutual happiness, although he knows that we're made for each other. He's hoping to succeed this year in changing your mind, but how little he knows your soul." End quote. This may have been a relationship Hitler already knew about and was threatened by. By mid-1931, Hitler was spending less and less time in Munich as he was getting more and more popular in Germany. He did not appear in public with Geli anymore, as he feared that would give the wrong impression. If she went out, she had Gestapo escorts and firm and early curfews. That September, she finally made arrangements to go to Vienna for voice training with her uncle's permission. But then he changed his mind. Depending on which version you accept, Geli and Hitler may or may not have had a very vocal row about that just as he was heading off on a campaign swing. She may or may not have yelled down at his waiting car, "So I can't go?" And he may or may not have yelled, "No, you can't." That was on the afternoon of Friday, September 18th, 1931. Her body was found on the floor of her room in their shared flat at 10 the following morning after her absence was realized and her lock was jimmied loose by a screwdriver. She had bled profusely from the mouth. In one version, she was found lying face down. In another, she was on the floor but upright against something. One arm was said to have been within easy reach of the Walther 635. It's a tad unclear who found her. Whoever it was panicked and called the Brown House, Nazi HQ, to ask what to do now. That forced a red alert, all-hands-on-deck convocation of Hitler's most trusted aides, Franz Schwarz, Gregor Strasser, that's Otto's brother, Baldur von Schirach, Max Amann, and Rudolf Hess. They decided to get ahead of the story. Someone called a press liaison to ask them to prepare and issue a release to say that Hitler was in deep mourning about the terrible circumstance of his niece's suicide. By the way, Hitler still had not been informed as he was on the road, and they had already chosen a successor should this undo him. 25 minutes after that call, the Brain Trust called back and asked the press officer to change that to an accidental shooting. They were too late. The release had already gone out. It was decided then to frame Geli's state of mind as deeply concerned about her career as a singer and that she had become despondent over her chances. It was now about 11:30. Someone finally thought to call the police. When they arrived, they were told that Geli's door had been locked from around 3 p.m. the previous afternoon. When someone went to turn her bed down at 10 the night before, the door was still locked, and they assumed she'd gone out. The police, looking for a suicide note, found a letter penned by Geli on her dressing table. It was an unfinished letter, likely to a girlfriend. It read, quote, "When I come to Vienna, I hope very soon we'll drive together to Semmering and," end quote. She had stopped writing in mid-word. The and, or und, as the German case may be, was missing its final letter. Semmering Court is a mountain resort in Lower Austria, known for its excellent biking, hiking, and skiing. And this was an odd find. She was making future plans when it suddenly struck her to kill herself. That seemed immediately doubtful. Also, the police determined that Geli had been shot in the chest. The single bullet had missed her heart and pierced her lung, traveling downward, ending up lodged in her back, just above her left hip. Here's Heyman. Quote, "This means that if she was standing or sitting when the shot was fired, the barrel of the pistol was pointing downward and the hand holding it was higher than her heart. Even if she was lying on the couch or the floor, it would not have been easy for her to shoot herself." End quote. By this time, Hitler, Hoffmann, and Schreck had been told and were racing back to Munich, arriving there around 2:45 on that Saturday afternoon. When they got to the house, according to the pathologist on site, Geli had been dead for about 24 hours. The Munich Post headline the next day read, "A mysterious affair, suicide of Hitler's niece." They sketched an ugly picture. Quote, "On Friday, September 18th, there was once again a violent quarrel between Herr Hitler and his niece. What was the reason? The vivacious 23-year-old student, Geli, wanted to go to Vienna. She wanted to become engaged. Hitler was strongly opposed to this. The two of them had recurrent disagreements about it. After a violent scene, Hitler left his flat on the second floor of 16 Prince Regentenplatz. On Saturday, 19 September, it was reported that Fräulein Geli had been found shot in the flat with Hitler's gun in her hand. The dead woman's nose was broken and there were other serious injuries on the body." End quote. Meanwhile, back at the house, housekeeper Annie Winter told police that Geli had locked herself in her room about 15 minutes after Hitler left for Hamburg. She also said she saw Geli rush in and out of Hitler's bedroom just before that. Miss Winter's son would later tell Brigitte Hitler, Adolf's half-sister-in-law, that his mother had heard Hitler accuse Geli of wanting to see an attractive Jewish singing teacher while in Vienna, and he had expressly forbade that. Geli had responded, quote, "I have to go to Vienna, Uncle Alf, because I'm going to have a baby," end quote. Even later, Angela, Geli's mother, said that her daughter had wanted to marry a violinist from Linz, but that too had been verboten. So, did she die because she was pregnant? Kate Haste, author of 2001's Nazi Women, does seem to think Geli was pregnant with the Viennese Jewish teacher's child. The ever-helpful Annie Winter told police that Geli had found a note in one of Hitler's coat pockets. Annie found it ripped up in the trash and had pieced it together. It read, "Dear Herr Hitler, thank you again for the wonderful invitation to the theater. It was a memorial evening. I am most grateful to you for your kindness. I am counting the hours until I may have the joy of another meeting. Yours, Eva." So, did Geli die because she was jealous? And Christ almighty, this thing is getting complicated. And no sooner had the press reported that her nose was broken than the doctor who signed the death certificate said there were no such wounds. He said the discoloration on her face was, quote, "probably explained by the fact that death was primarily consequent on suffocation following the shot in the lung," end quote. That last bit on suffocation, medically, it meant she had died a lingering, horrible death, apparently face down, drowning in her own blood. The Munich Metropolitan Police did not ask a lot of the questions that we're asking here. It's anyone's guess if they were told not to or if they genuinely had no suspicions. So where was Hitler exactly when his beloved niece died? We've said he was on a trip, obviously, but that could have been after. His only alibi at the earliest possible time of death were his friends. Heinrich Hoffmann swore he had been by Hitler's side the day before and that he had even tried to quiet Geli after she had become so upset. Henrietta Hoffmann seemed to think Geli might have shot herself to hurt Hitler. And there's a whole other school of thought that Hitler's own people knew how much of a liability Geli was to their beloved leader, and they had to do what he would not. One other scenario remains, of course, that Hitler killed her, by accident, perhaps, or in a fit of rage. He was known for his rage, after all. And he would soon enough be known for his enormous capacity to murder. There are 1,000 small things to dissect about the room in which Geli Raubal died. Why did a Munich city councilman accompany the police there? And why was he later elevated to the role of treasurer of the Nazi party? Why did no one check for powder burns on Geli's hands? Why did no one investigate the odd trajectory of the bullet? Was she, in fact, pregnant? Why were there inconsistencies among the witnesses as to who entered her bedroom and who found her? Why was it that the only thing everyone agreed on was that Hitler wasn't there? Did anyone ask why there was a 90-minute gap between the time they supposedly found the body and when the police were called? And why, for God's sake, would this gloriously optimistic woman think suicide was the answer? Granted, suicide is complex and plenty of outwardly optimistic people struggle mightily. But Geli was literally mid-sentence writing about her plans for the future. Didn't that strike any investigators as odd? Geli's body was whisked through official channels. It left Munich on Monday the 21st. She was buried on the 23rd, having traveled there by train on the 22nd. Hitler had paid for a spacious site in Vienna's central cemetery. Her headstone faced the cemetery church of St. Charles Borromeo. There had been no autopsy, no inquest. In fact, only one doctor examined her body after her death and before it was released to her family and taken to Austria for burial. You might be reasonably laughing at me right now. What were you expecting, Amber? These were Nazis. I get that, but it's just 1931. Hitler is not Hitler yet. But yeah, that doesn't mean he and his organization weren't organized and, let's just say, influential. For the record, Geli received a Catholic burial, notably something that could not have been done if the priest in Vienna believed she had died by suicide. The good father, his name was Johann Pont, would later say he would not have done so if he believed she was responsible for her own death. He later wrote to the editor of Paris's daily newspaper, Le Journal, in 1939, that people should draw their own conclusion about what he knew to be true about her death. Brave man. Even as early as 1931, there had been rumors that Geli's death was not as it appeared. One journalist, Fritz Gerlich, would not let it rest. After much investigation, Gerlich told Brigitte Hitler, remember that's Adolf's sister-in-law, she was married to Alois Hitler Jr., that he believed Hitler had killed Geli. He said he had found the owner of a Munich restaurant that Hitler and his niece used to frequent. The owner, Karl Zainter, told the newsman that the pair had a private room that Friday night, and Hitler did not leave until 1 a.m, meaning Geli wasn't alone in her locked room from 3 p.m. on. Not only that, but Zainter contended that Hitler had threatened her with a gun. That version of her death was remarkably similar to the one that Otto Strasser said he had heard from a Benedictine monk. Further, he said his brother Gregor had to spend 3 days and nights with Hitler to stop him from killing himself because of what he had done. The Strasser brothers maintained that the public prosecutor wanted to charge Hitler, but was not allowed to. Journalist Ron Rosenbaum, writing in Vanity Fair in April 1992 in an article titled Hitler's Doomed Angel, noted that, quote, in March 1933, just as Gerlich was about to publish the results of his investigation in the opposition newspaper he edited, Der Geradeweg, a squad of stormtroopers broke into his newspaper office, beat him up, seized and burned his manuscripts, and dragged him off to prison, and then to Dachau, where he was executed in July of 1934 during the Night of the Long Knives, end quote. Notably, Gregor Strasser died the same way on the same day. So did Karl Zainter, the restaurant owner. Hitler kept the Munich house, changing nothing in Geli's room, setting up what some called a shrine to her there. In a will that Adolf Hitler made in 1938, he gave everything in Geli's room to Angela. At the Nuremberg trials, where Hitler's surviving senior staff were put on trial for war crimes, close political ally and Luftwaffe chief Hermann Göring testified that, quote, Geli's death had such a devastating effect on Hitler that it changed his relationship to everyone else, end quote. Personal photographer Heinrich Hoffmann said that he could point to her death as the precise moment that, quote, the seed of inhumanity began to sprout in Hitler, end quote. Ernst Homstengel agreed. He said, quote, with her death, the way was clear for his final development into a demon, end quote. As with all things Hitler, fact is so frequently integrated with fiction or fiddled with so fully that there is no sorting out what is true. In 1987, a man named Hans Horvath asked for permission to exhume Geli. Ostensibly, he wanted to find out if her nose was broken or if she had been pregnant. He was not allowed to do so. In fact, in Googling Horvath's name, he comes up in a Druck magazine report on the Hitler forgery industry. In that report, the writers call the Father Pont story so much Nazi folklore. So many stories, so many lies. So, what is true about Geli's grave? According to my best internet searching, Geli Raubal's grave is where it's supposed to be. The original gravestone was apparently destroyed, but it's easy enough to find her, and people do. It's in the same place where Hitler reportedly visited often, or as often as he could, given that he was preoccupied with world dominion and genocide. I was left not knowing what to think. The DNA showing his micropenis? I buy that. The suicide? I think not. Murder? Probably. But I don't pretend to know who did it or why. It could have been Hitler, of course. He wasn't a man famous for being level-headed, after all. It could have also been one of his sidekicks looking to free him from further distraction. Or maybe it was someone else in Geli's life. If I'm being honest, though, I admit I lean the Hitler minion's direction. But it's hard to land on any sort of truth, what with the vast array of theories and conspiracies and the odd scarcity of paperwork within a regime famous for over-documenting everything. But one thing I feel pretty certain about was that Hitler loved Geli more than anyone else in his life. Eva Braun, his loyal flaxen-haired shadow, was then, and would forever be, in a distant second place. To research this case, journalist Amy Wilson read Ronald Hayman's 1997 book, Hitler and Geli. She wandered down many a rabbit hole and through just a smattering of what Google estimated to be the hundreds of thousands of books written on Hitler, though Geli is not mentioned in most for obvious reasons. Ron Rosenbaum's work, the most easily accessible since it was written in English, was very helpful. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Head to www.grabbagcollab.com for exclusive content related to this show and access to other series on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this case was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and sometimes my child, Hunt Van Benskoten. Other music comes from Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, please help us out by rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts. Also tell your friends. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com. On Instagram, we're @centuriespod, and you can find us on the Crimes of the Centuries Facebook page.